Let's build this $600 budget gaming PC that will both look amazing on your desk and perform amazingly well in 1080p and even 1440p. I'll go over everything you need to buy, run through some benchmarks, and go over the best settings to push your machine to the absolute max. And if you have a little bit more budget, I'll even go over some alternatives you can easily make to get even more performance. So let's get started right after this video sponsor. When you install Windows on your Steam Deck or any other PC for that matter, you're going to need to activate it to unlock all the settings. Why spend a ton of money for a code when you can use the sponsor of today's video, SCDKey? You can purchase Windows keys at a large discount, and to get 25% off your order, use code JASON, that's JASON, to get 25% off your order. After purchasing, you'll get your code pretty much instantly and be able to unlock your computer's full potential. And remember that all Windows 10 Pro users can upgrade to Windows 11 for free at any time in the future using these keys. Just take your code, go to your Windows activation menu, pop it in, and boom. Windows is activated, and you should be on your way. Thanks to SCDKey. Alright, disclaimer time. I live in the USA, so all of this was purchased online using US dollars, so prices and taxes will vary depending on where you live. Component price tags change almost every single day, and I can't control what manufacturers charge for their products. I'll just share what I paid for it at the time of making this video. And as always, don't feel like you need to use this video as a one-to-one guide. Use it as a jumping off point to build the gaming PC of your dreams that fits your budget and your needs. Let's just get right into it then, and start off with the case. We are working with a little bit more budget than we normally do on this channel, so I wanted to grab a case that was a little bit more premium than the bargain bin hot boxes we usually resort to, but obviously still wanted to save some money and not go too crazy because after all, it's just a case and it won't really help with performance. I picked up this Corsair 3000D Airflow from Amazon when it was on sale for only $60, and of course I bought the white one because I just love that clean Corsair white look. It's a mid-tower PC case with this interesting snowflake looking gradient on the front to allow tons of airflow to come through the front of the PC, and has room for up to 8 120mm case fans for maximum airflow, or even a 360mm radiator, although I think it'd be pretty cramped. It can technically do it. Has a lot of room for really beefy graphics cards if you decide to upgrade in the future, easy to remove and clean fan filters, and has an ample amount of room for cable management in the back. I'd say one of the downsides is that the front I/O doesn't support USB-C, which isn't the end of the world, but it's 2024 and I think all cases should start supporting that. It also only comes with 2 fans in the box. 2 black fans. I don't know what they were smoking. Why don't the fans match the case? I know exactly where I'm going to put these. Other than that, I think the case looks great, definitely has a more premium feeling than other cases at this price range. So it looks like we're going to need some fans, so I went with the tried and true 3-pack ARGB fans from Thermalright. I don't know how Thermalright makes money off of these. Not only are they 4-pin PWM and 3-pin 5V ARGB capable, you can daisy chain them, they look amazing, they aren't crazy loud, and they only cost like $12 or $13 on Amazon for a 3-pack. They are pretty much the only choice when it comes to budget ARGB fans right now. I'll throw 2 fans in the front for intake and 1 in the back for exhaust, but realistically, we would be fine with just 2 or 3 fans total. Now for the power supply, we don't really need a white one to match the case's look as it's usually hidden in the back under that PSU shroud, but I found a good one that only costs like $2 more, so I thought, why not? This is the 600 watt Uppbeat Prestige, a gold rated power supply that I've used on the channel recently and I've really enjoyed. I found this guy on Amazon for $55, but the black version can be found cheaper. 600 watts and gold rated efficiency gives us a lot of headroom for any future upgrades, so we don't need to completely gut the computer if we just want to upgrade the CPU or graphics card a little bit. This power supply isn't modular, but hey, that's okay. At least it doesn't have ketchup and mustard cables. It's motherboard time. I couldn't resist another AM4 pickup. Just having an easy upgrade path with low cost RAM and boards is too good to pass up at this price. Hopefully we see DDR5 RAM drop in price soon so I can start making budget builds using that, but until then, we'll keep using DDR4. And that's not that bad of a sacrifice. Sure, DDR5 is faster for sure, but you can still get some insane performance out of DDR4 for the price if you know what you're doing. So once again, I utilized Amazon resale to pick up a great all-around motherboard, the Asus Prime B450MA2. For only $52, this thing really can't be beat. 4 DIMM slots with support for up to 128 gigs of DDR4 RAM, stable B450 chipset, ports for RGB, BIOS flashback, and a single NVMe PCIe 3.0 M.2 slot. And sure, I wish it was Gen 4 simply for the longevity of the build, but hey, sacrifices need to be made when trying to achieve perfection. But I like this B450 motherboard as opposed to an A320 since we can basically put any AM4 CPU we want in here without wondering if the whole thing is going to explode. And the fact that AMD is still, to this day, making AM4 processors is just absolutely crazy. They are releasing the Ryzen 9 5900 XT and Ryzen 7 5800 XT this very month. So I guess you can't call AM4 a dead platform because as long as AMD keeps supporting it, it's alive and well. But in this budget, we can't really afford any of those fancy processors anyway. We need something humble, but still good enough to push some frames in modern games. The Ryzen 5 3600 is always a popular choice, but we're at a slightly higher budget, so we can do a little bit better than that. This is the Ryzen 5 5600, which beats out its little brother, the 5500, by quite a bit and offers a lot more features than cheaper CPUs like the Ryzen 5 2600 or the 3600. The 5600 is a 6-core, 12-thread CPU running in the Zen 3 architecture. And despite its low price tag, it can actually boost up to 4.4 GHz, meaning this processor is actually strong enough for most graphics cards out there and can handle most modern games. The 5600 also has support for PCIe 4.0 like I mentioned earlier, so you can utilize faster SSDs if you decide on a more expensive motherboard. But for our use case here, which is mostly a gaming machine, the 5600 is going to do great. Now, you could buy the 5600 from Amazon resale for about $120 if you'd like, but if you want to save some money like I did, go to AliExpress and pick up one for only $74. But I think it's enough of a savings to make it worth it. And the processor is going to be just as good as the one you get on Amazon resale. But since I bought this on AliExpress, it didn't come with a cooler, so we need to grab one. And luckily, there were a ton of really great deals on some really good coolers recently. This is the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Halo White. You might be familiar with the Hyper 212 line from back in the day, but this is the updated version that has some great performance and some pretty good looks. On sale, this thing goes down to only $15, and for that price, there really isn't much else to say about it. It works well, it looks good, and there's no need to spend any more money on a fancy cooler at this budget. Now for the memory, there's no need for anything fancy, but I did want to try to get something that matches the white aesthetic we're trying to go for here. So I picked up these two sticks of DDR4 RAM, totaling out to 16 gigs total with a speed of 3600 megatransfers per second. The white look of this RAM only costs like $1 extra, and I thought that was worth the clean look. And since we have a Ryzen CPU, this 3600 RAM speed is going to go a long way to increase our performance, even more so than it would on a similar spec Intel build. Ryzen loves fast RAM after all. These memory sticks are from a brand called TimeTech, which is a lesser known brand, so I can't speak too much about reliability in the long run, but the few times I've used them in the past has been just fine and they performed adequately. If you decide to build this PC and you want to do things more than just gaming, so maybe some light video editing, streaming, or other multi-core heavy tasks, I would consider bumping this up to 32 gigs for just a little bit more money. Now, unfortunately, we are still in the dark days of expensive SSD prices, so there's not a lot of good deals to be had for budget builds. And I just don't think it's worth saving a few dollars to go down to a SATA SSD, considering we would be losing out on a lot of speed to do that. So I just chose the 500 gig Crucial P3 Plus, which is a fantastic and stable Gen 4 NVMe SSD that is fast enough to really outperform everything we need on this Gen 3 motherboard and is reliable enough that you're going to be able to transfer this to your next PC build, which will probably be Gen 4 or maybe even Gen 5 at that point. So you are kind of future-proofing yourself a bit by spending a little more on the SSD. It's only half a terabyte, but once you can afford some more storage down the line, you can always add a larger SSD to act as your game drive. Now your game drive can be a 2.5-inch SATA SSD and you won't see any issues with performance or game loading speeds. I just think that if you're building a new PC in 2024, your operating system and programs are better off being on an NVMe drive, and your secondary drive can be SATA or even a spinning hard drive if you want. Now, the final piece for this build is the graphics card, and I wanted to choose something from the newest generation of graphics cards, but golly gee, they sure are expensive, huh? There really aren't many budget options, so I did what I could, and I picked up the RTX 4060, the cheapest card in NVIDIA's current lineup, but that's not saying much. The 4060 got a lot of bad publicity when it first came out, mostly due to its outrageous price tag compared to its performance, especially when compared to its last generation counterpart, the RTX 3060. It actually lost 4 gigs of VRAM, which just felt weird because why were features being taken away from the newest offerings? But I don't think the 4060 is a bad card. I just think it's not worth the price tag that it first came out at. And frankly, I don't think it's worth the $290 you can find it now at brand new as well. But I was able to pick up this RTX 4060 slightly used for about $240 after shipping. And really, I think that's the highest price I would pay for one, but there is a lot more to love here other than just raw performance. The power efficiency of this card is really amazing, considering it can push out the frames that it does and uses very little power and basically pushes out very little heat is a great feature for someone like me. I live in the South, and in the summer, any heat being created by my PC is just making the already dreadful summer that much worse. But when I was benchmarking the 4060, there was no difference in temperature in the room that I was in. It ran cool and quiet. The 4060 also has access to DLSS, which will really help you out if you decide to play at a resolution higher than 1080p. I don't really recommend using it at 1080p unless you absolutely have to, as it just makes everything look kind of smushy. The RTX 4060 is on track to being the most popular video card in the world, which is surprising after seeing all the negative reviews surrounding its release. But this card has a lot of other features, like RTX Voice, Shadow Play, entry-level ray tracing, CUDA and Tensor cores for better video editing and AI workloads, NVENC for better streaming capabilities, and a ton of other NVIDIA-only standouts that just make it a great all-around GPU. So let's assemble this PC and see what this card can do and how much performance we can get out of a $600 budget gaming PC. Let's get started on the benchmarks, and as always, we can start with Grand Theft Auto 5. This is a very CPU heavy game, and it's been out for a long time, but it's still heavily played, so it's always good to see what the numbers are to see how our processor is holding up. So in 1080p at very high settings, we are getting 175 FPS with a 1% low of 143, and at 1440p, the average FPS is 151 with a 1% low of 115. Now, these are pretty average numbers, and it's really hard to push this game to really high frame rates past this since, it's pretty old, and it obviously doesn't support options like DLSS, but it's an otherwise pretty stable frame rate, and if you're looking to play, GTA RP on this rig, it would be a pretty great experience. I did randomly get frame drops on both resolutions when running the benchmark, but this only happened when it was switching scenes, and after looking online, this is a pretty common occurrence during the benchmark, so I threw those numbers out and I didn't include them in the previously explained numbers. Horizon Zero Dawn came out a few years ago, but I still really like the built-in benchmark, as it does a good job of just swirling around the city. Running at 1080p with all the settings set to high, I was able to get around 110 FPS on average with a 1% low of 77, which would lead to a really great playing experience and is a great frame rate considering the price of the PC, But this is a single player experience game, so I'd prefer to play at a higher resolution to really enjoy the visuals. At 1440p at the same settings, I was able to average 74 FPS with a 1% low of 51. Not as good as our 1080p results, of course, but it would absolutely be playable and would look really beautiful on a big screen. If it was me though, I would put it on 1440p, turn on DLSS, and get the best of both worlds. Beautiful high resolution and higher frame rates. But the 4060 in this machine is playing this game really well either way. Now another CPU heavy game is Fortnite, which you can play on any potato, but people for some reason really like to see this game get benchmarked, so here we are. The CPU we are running in this rig isn't bottom of the barrel by any means, but it's also not anything crazy, so we should at least be able to see some pretty stable frame rates even at high refresh rates. Running at 1080p on DirectX 12, I was able to average 215 FPS with a 1% low of about 170. The FPS of this game is kind of all over the place, but it luckily is all over the place on the high end, so unless you're running a 240Hz monitor, which I don't think someone building a computer at this price would have, you really shouldn't notice. And if you decide to play this game in 1440p, you can average around 220 FPS with a 1% low of 162, which is basically the exact same as we saw in 1080p with only slightly more GPU usage. So I think I could max out the graphics even higher without any issues. Or if I wanted insane frames, I can go into performance mode, but I think that would just push our CPU more and not our GPU. Not many people have monitors that can run frame rates past 144Hz anyway, unless they are exclusively esports heavy turbo nerds. So for a really optimal experience playing this game, even at high frame rates, 1440p with max settings might be the way to go if you have the monitor. And remember, this is an Nvidia heavy title, so you better believe outside of a benchmark like this, I would be playing this with DLSS turned on for a much smoother performance. I tested out Red Dead Redemption 2 because despite being a few years old, it's still a great benchmarking game because of how many times it shows up in other videos like these, so you can compare these results directly with results from another video and get a good idea of the performance differences. Trying out 1080p with everything at ultra settings and no help from DLSS or FSR, we averaged about 77 FPS and 1% lows of 61. Not a super high frame rate, but ultra level graphics really taxes your GPU. So I'm sure we would see much better numbers if we went down even to high settings. But again, it's a single player experience, so we really want to see all those great textures. So let's turn up the resolution to 1440p. And at those same ultra settings, we averaged 64 FPS with 1% lows of 49. So a little lower than 1080p, but I would worry about those 1% lows. So my suggestion would be to turn the graphics down to medium or high, or just keep them on ultra, turn on DLSS, and let it rip. A totally great, high resolution gaming experience. So let's get back to multiplayer games and try another modern shooter, The Finals. This game came out late last year and it is surprisingly difficult to run. It has a lot of particles on screen all at once, large sprawling maps, and also has built-in support for ray tracing, DLSS, FSR, and every other software support you can think of. But as always, our benchmarks will be just raw performance. At 1080p medium settings with lighting set to static, we are able to get 130 FPS with 1% lows of 66. Pretty great performance, and our GPU usage is only at 80%, so we aren't really pushing the graphics card to its maximum potential. I think we could put the graphics up to high or maybe even set some of those lighting effects to do some light ray tracing. It makes this game look absolutely stunning. But at 1440p with the graphics set to low, we only got about 98 FPS with 1% lows of 59. Not a bad experience by any means, but when you're playing these competitive shooters, you often want every frame you can get. This game runs really great with DLSS on, so that could be an option if you aren't content with 100 FPS. But if you're looking for the best performance to maybe get a competitive edge, maybe keep this one on 1080p, but it just won't look as pretty. No benchmark is complete without a quick Cyberpunk 2077 run. This game had a rocky start, but it really has become the standard for what is required by a modern gaming PC, and it has all the features available that you could ever want to test. Now, we did really better than I thought on this game. At 1080p with medium settings, I averaged 128 FPS with 1% lows of 104. Absolutely stunning results. I don't know if this game has a hard bias for Nvidia or something, but I'm super impressed to get those numbers with a 60 level card like the RTX 4060. totally playable, even at these super high frame rates. But of course, it's a single player experience, so let's crank it to 1440p. And at that resolution, with low graphical settings, we averaged out 88 FPS with 1% lows of 68, so not as great results. It seems like the textures at that high frame rate really taxed our GPU and that hurt our frame rate. But hey, 88 FPS is nothing to scoff at, especially considering this PC only costs $600. And if you really insist on playing at 1440p, you can always use DLSS or experiment with other settings. But this is super playable either way, and it's going to look amazing. So for $600, I think this PC build is able to push way above its weight class and just be able to be a great all-around computer. For students, content creators, programmers, and gamers, this thing will help you with pretty much anything you need, and I think it actually looks pretty good too. The clean white aesthetic is something I can really appreciate, especially with the soft RGB we added with those thermal ray fans. Now if $600 is a little outside of your budget and you are looking for a PC that is a little cheaper, check out these two videos where we built computers at slightly lower budgets but still didn't compromise on performance or aesthetics. And just remember, a gaming PC can be had at any budget, so make the right decisions with your money for your needs, whether that's a $100 PC or a $2,000 PC. It all depends on what you need to do with it, how much money you're comfortable with spending, and how long you're willing to wait for good deals. If you liked the video, please get subscribed for more technology content. I'm trying to hit 20k subs by the end of the year, so if you could help me with that goal, I would really appreciate it. My name is Jason. Thanks for watching. Let's build this $600 budget gaming PC that will both look